Hi students, these are video vocab notes for Chapter 29, Section 4, the Soviet Union. That section starts off with a profile of Vladimir Lenin in power. We want to look at what changed under his governance. The major thing was his reaction to World War I. Now, the combination of World War I, the revolution that they had just had, the two revolutions, the February and the October revolutions, and the Russian Civil War, had left him with a lot of issues to deal with. Basically, Russia was a wreck. The first thing Lenin did to sort of get Russia moving in a new direction was that he nationalized, or brought under government control, almost all of the major industries: coal, oil, steel, etc. He did continue to let small businesses and small farms operate on their own in what was called the New Economic Policy, or NEP. This is kind of an interesting combination of communism and capitalism. Government control of major industries is a communist feature, but letting small businesses and farmers buy and sell goods on the open market is a capitalist feature. The New Economic Policy was kind of a mix of both. By this point, 1922, Russia, as we have known it for so long, is no more. It's been replaced by a new political entity, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, otherwise known as the Soviet Union. There were more republics than just the Russian Republic. Russia thought of themselves as a Soviet Socialist Republic, but so did all of the satellite states: the Lithuanian Soviet Socialist Republic, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Collectively, they made up the USSR. Ideally, the Russian Revolution had been fought to put power in the hands of the workers and the common people. Theoretically, through the Soviets, the workers' councils, the workers would have control of their government. However, in reality, the new government bureaucracy and the Communist Party had all of the control, which meant that Lenin had direct control of the government. The next section in this reading is about Trotsky and Stalin. In 1924, Lenin dies. He had a couple of strokes that limited his ability to work. His health declined quite rapidly. He died in 1924, leaving a power vacuum at the top of the Communist Party. Control of the Soviet Union was up for grabs. One person who makes sort of a natural move for control of the Soviet Union is Leon Trotsky. He'd been the military leader of the Red Army during the Russian Civil War. His outlook was that communism needed to spread naturally worldwide through the will of the workers. His was very much a Menshevik view, even though he had fought in the Red Army on the Bolshevik side. The other contender for control of the Communist Party was Joseph Stalin. He was a pretty hardcore Marxist from Georgia, which is one of the Soviet Socialist republics in the Union. He didn't agree with Trotsky on how to advance the communist cause. He thought a self-contained, successful communist state in Russia, to sort of build communism in the Soviet Union, would be the beginning, and that then, naturally, it would spread worldwide as Russia became more and more successful. Two very different views on how to advance the communist cause. Stalin was secretary of the Communist Party, and he was a very able administrator. He was excellent at the art of governing. It gave him the control of the Communist Party, and with control of the party structure, he was able to exile Trotsky, who left Russia, left the Soviet Union, ended up in Latin America, trying to start some communist revolutions over there, and ultimately Stalin's long reach allowed him to hunt down and kill Trotsky. So with Stalin in clear control by the mid-1920s, he starts making some substantial changes to the way the Soviet Union runs, and the first of these are his 5-year plans. With Lenin dead and Trotsky exiled, Stalin replaces the new economic plan with what he called 5-year plans. He broke the future of the Soviet Union into 5-year chunks and set economic targets for each one. He was all about building heavy industry. Remember that Russia had been slow to industrialize. They were behind Britain and Germany and America in terms of industrialization. Stalin thought that industrialization was the most essential thing for the Soviet Union, and he demanded the sacrifice of the Russian people in the name of progress. He said, stop producing consumer goods, stop producing comfort goods, no luxury items. All of our emphasis, all of our energy must be on industry, and especially heavy industry. Coal, oil, steel, railways, things like that. In order to do this, he implemented a policy of collectivization. He gathered farmland from small private farmers and landowners, brought huge amounts of farmland under government control. The idea was that it would become more efficient under government control, giving them extra grain to be sold to other countries for profit and freeing up workers to work in industry. It was meant to enhance production, but it failed. It was extremely inefficient and led to quite a bit of suffering. Opposition to this collectivization came from the kulaks. These were prosperous, sort of middle-class landowners. They were still technically peasants. They had no social rank, but they had money and they had land, and they did not want to see their land become government property. They resisted collectivization, which led, under Stalin's government, to mass executions and arrests of these landowners. It was so devastating in Ukraine when an environmental collapse was followed by basically the Soviet government repossessing all of their grain. It led to a famine that killed Ukrainians on a scale that is comparable to the Nazi Holocaust that will follow in a decade or so. Stalin was a ruthless leader, and he maintained this dictatorship with what people sort of ruling with an iron fist, as people call it. He terrorized the opposition. He ran a brutal, violent secret police force. There were labor camps in Siberia where he would send political opponents or anyone who objected to his governance. A legendary propaganda campaign driven toward uniting the people behind the Soviet state. Stalin stands historically as kind of the ultimate model of dictatorship. Through the 1920s and 1930s, he conducted purges of the Communist Party. Anyone who objected to anything he did, even within the Communist Party structure, even within the government, he eliminated them any way that he could. He silenced them, imprisoning them on false charges, torturing them into confessing to crimes they hadn't committed, fake trials where he, after torturing them into confessing, he would have them appear at a trial charged with a crime they hadn't committed, confess to avoid any future torture, whereupon they would either be sent to the labor camps to be worked to death or executed on the spot. Stalin also kept control of Soviet culture during this time. There was no independent art or literature or music. Everything was strictly controlled by a Communist Party agent named Maxim Gorky. He brought all of Soviet art and literature under this sort of common style. Essentially, anything you created artistically had to glorify the Soviet state and had to match the official Soviet state style. You had two choices as an artist. You could either comply or find something else to do with your time. Anything else, you risked being sent off to the labor camps. Stalin also abandoned the international communist movements. Communism International, known as the Comintern, Stalin distanced the Soviet Union from them. This would have been something that Trotsky would have supported, right? Growing communism elsewhere in the world. Stalin instead decided to focus on growing communism in the USSR first and foremost.